global public debt to GDP ratio is projected to reach 100% by the end of this decade. The public debt levels in advanced economies, in fact, are much higher than those in the emerging market economies.
Global debt is the major concern for the world right now. It is rising, and how? In February 2024, global debt hit a new record high of $313 trillion as per IIF data. In the last quarter of 2023, the debt surged by $15 trillion. About a decade ago, it was at $210 trillion, and you will be surprised to find out that around 55% of this rise is originated from mature markets like the US, France, and Germany. The global debt to GDP ratio declined by around 2 percentage points to nearly 330% in 2023. The takeaway from the report was also that the reduction of debt to GDP ratio of developing countries was particularly notable. India, Argentina, China, Russia, Malaysia, and South Africa registered the largest increases as per the report. Now, what is the debt to GDP ratio? It is a proportion of the country's national debt to its gross domestic product. It is measured in percentages. Like India's debt to GDP ratio is 81.6% of the GDP as per RBI report. As per IMF, in advanced economies, debt to GDP ratio was the highest in Japan, reaching 255% in 2023. On the fifth position was the US, with debt to GDP ratio reaching 123%. RBI Governor Shaktikanta Das in the MPC press conference said that the rate cuts could be delayed due to the rising global debt. US is the world's largest economy, and its national debt also hit $32 trillion in 2023. Currently, a report suggests it is at $34 trillion. While it remains below the G7 average of 128%, Fed Chief Jerome Powell said that the national debt is quote-unquote unsustainable. Unsustainable debt means that the limit has exceeded. Experts have warned that America will be left with severe, irreversible scars if the national debt goes unchecked. The Congressional Budget Office, or CBO, estimates that by 2054, US's public debt will represent 166% of the GDP, reaching $141.1 trillion. Now, while the debt is not a very bad thing, but a country should control its growing debt. US's debt is rising about $1 trillion in every 100 days as per reports. Experts say that it is mainly because of the rise in income inequalities and geopolitical concerns, including the Russia-Ukraine war and the Red Sea crisis. Now let's dive further into this and understand why the debt is piling up and who are these countries owing to. Countries borrow from banks, financial institutions like IMF and World Bank. Then there are bond sales like treasury bills, and then countries also borrow from other countries. There is also internal borrowing from the banks of their own. The amount of loans that the country owes is called national debt. Now you might be wondering, why do these countries even borrow? Countries borrow because they don't get enough funds from taxes, custom duties, social insurance, and more, which are the sources of income for these countries. Talking about India itself, only 1.5% Indians pay tax in its entirety as per reports. Corporate tax was also slashed in 2019, so most income comes from income tax and GST, and income tax collection is too low. So to run a country, the government needs money, and it takes loans from various banks and financial institutions. At the end of September 2023, India's external debt was placed at $635.3 billion, and this is the data of how much countries owe to IMF, and Argentina owes the most money. World Bank 121 low to middle income countries owe money. However, only 10 of these owe more than half of the $391 billion. And India takes the top spot. Countries are also selling bonds like treasury bills to raise funds and also borrow from other countries. Now, when this debt exceeds the limit, it becomes unsustainable. Now, why do these countries which are already in debt give loans to other countries? Well, this is to strengthen their influence on the global map. See China, for example. China is one of the biggest lenders in the world but is facing an economic slowdown. Remember BRI? It is called a debt trap by experts. Through BRI, China said that it would build roads, invest in other countries, and in return, it would influence the policies of the country indirectly. That's the whole reason why many countries are now indebted to China, and the biggest example of this was Sri Lanka when it was not able to pay back interests. A detailed video link on the topic is on the screen and in the description too. Do check it out. Now, to reduce this debt, you need to get more revenue from taxes like income tax, corporate tax, GST in India, etc., and reduce your spending. That's the major focus of the Indian government, to create jobs, get more companies from abroad to invest in India and increase revenue, thereby decreasing the fiscal deficit. And well, as of now, India is at a bright spot. Why? Because India's GST collection in March 2024 was the second highest ever at 1.78 lakh crore rupees. While the US's national debt is piling up, China is facing an economic slowdown, Japan is in a recession, and Germany is also at a brink of recession, the Indian economy as of now is at a better place than the larger economies.
I think global debt, it's not so much a problem in India, because I think our debt to GDP is at a certain level, and it is expected to moderate, about which I have talked about in the last MPC statement. And when I say our debt to GDP, I mean the country's debt vis-a-vis external lenders and the debt of the state and the central governments put together. These are all within manageable limits. They are said to moderate in the coming years. But if you look at global public debt in some of the advanced economies, I think with their large fiscal deficits and with their large percentage of borrowing, with their large percentage of debt to GDP ratios, and if this continues, it can pose pose bigger challenges.
India is expected to become a developed economy by 2047, but can it do that? Well, watch the video in the description below to know. So to summarize it all, the global debt is rising because governments are borrowing too much, global geopolitical uncertainties are mounting, and there is income inequality. Due to this, the process of rate cuts by central banks is also getting delayed. To reduce this debt, governments need to cap their spending and increase job opportunities so that the taxable income of the people increases and the collection is more. They can also do this by implementing investor-friendly policies and introducing schemes to strengthen their economy's infrastructure and growth. For more such news and views, keep watching ET Now.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.